Welcome to Profit Led, a podcast by and for bootstrapped founders brave or crazy enough to grow a business to profitability with very few resources. Profit Led is brought to you by eWebinar, the leading automated webinar platform built to save you from doing the same webinar over and over again, from sales demos to customer onboarding to training. This season, Profit Led's host Melissa Kwan, who is also co-founder and CEO of eWebinar, will walk you step-by-step through the company's journey to $1 million. Melissa is a 3-time bootstrapper who has spent 13 years building startups. Together with co-host and eWebinar COO Todd Parmley, they will dive into one major topic per episode, sharing war stories, mistakes, and lessons learned as they grew the company to $1 million in annual recurring revenue 36 months after product launch. So buckle up, fellow bootstrappers. It's gonna be one heck of a ride.
Welcome to Profit Led Season 2, our journey to $1 million. We are on episode 20.
Ooh, that's a round number. That's good.
Yeah. I'm Melissa Kwan, co-founder and CEO of eWebinar. I'm here with my co-host, eWebinar COO Todd Parmley.
How's it going?
Good. We're still in New York.
Yeah, I know. I like this.
Yeah.
I live here.
That's true.
Yeah.
I wish I lived here, but it's too expensive.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
Yeah, we're subletting this amazing loft right now.
Right.
I belong to this nomad community and people try to sublet their space in New York because it's so expensive. When I lived here, I also did that. And it's just like friends of friends kind of thing. And we're just covering their rent. It's like a $10,000 a month loft. Yeah. But it's like, and you would imagine it's like top notch, but it's not really. Like it's just a big space.
The location,
location is insane.
Location and size. Yeah. Those are actually the measures of the price of an apartment in New York.
Yeah. You could not the luxury level.
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, that's another world, right?
Yeah,
but you could have the crappiest kitchen.
Yeah.
The toilet is in the kitchen. I'm not kidding. I mean, one of the first apartments I saw was in the heart of Soho when I moved here. The shower was in the kitchen. Yeah. The toilet was in a room that was so small, you had to put your knees on the wall in order to sit down.
I remember when I lived here, and I lived in like a co-living house, like a four-bedroom house in Gramercy. And one of my roommates were moving out. Like we were just a halfway house for people moving to New York.
Yeah.
And she was looking on Craigslist and she showed me a listing of someone who was renting out half her bed because she works in the restaurant industry and she wasn't going to be home at night. So she was hoping to find someone who has an opposite schedule.
My God, that's next
for like $600 a month or something.
That is next level.
Like it's crazy.
It's bonkers.
But yeah, so this space is like, for people that know New York, it's on Elizabeth and Houston, not Houston, even though it's spelled Houston.
Yeah, right.
It's Houston.
Right.
It's like, how do you know you're from New York?
Yeah, right. When you come here.
Like, the first time I came to New York, I was talking to the cab driver.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Houston Street. They're like, what street?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I later on learned that it was Houston. But I'm like, come on. Like, it's Houston. Like, it's a very New York moment.
Yeah, but he's going to take the opportunity to humiliate you a little bit. Right?
Exactly. Because I was a tourist.
And just to be also, where you're staying is where the Bowery was. Like, this was like one of the worst neighborhoods in New York.
Yeah, there are no worse neighborhoods anymore.
There aren't. Yeah. No, there really isn't.
But I think like $10,000 a month, any other place, right? Maybe not like Tokyo or whatever.
Yeah,
that's like super luxury, multiple bedrooms, like high-end appliances, everything.
Maybe a staff.
Here you're just getting a big box in a good area and we will pay for it. But it's such a treat to like be able to stay there for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. And just to be, and not to commit to that. Like I would never be able to pay that.
No.
And I'm not even like including I don't know what the maintenance or internet or gas, whatever it costs. But like, this is a building where you still have to put a key into the elevator. I'd never seen one of these where you like every floor has like a key and not like a fob. Like you literally put your key in and you turn and then you can press the button. But anyways, very, very, very grateful to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
So in the last episode, we talked about our 12 $0 marketing strategies, but also some of the painful mistakes that we made spending on non-$0 marketing strategies before we arrived to that. And so today we're going to go deeper into one of those strategies, which is social selling.
Yeah.
So if you are on LinkedIn, if you're following me on LinkedIn, you already know that I'm a frequent contributor of that platform. But you might not know the backstory of why I started there. I touched on that in the previous episode. But I thought I wanted to like dig deeper into it just because it was such a big part.
Well, the obvious question is, why did you do it? Why did you start doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I completely ran out of leads, as we talked about. I completely ran out of leads. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know anything about marketing. My friend Lloyd Lobo, also a startup guy, told me to look at, LinkedIn, specifically Justin Welsh. I had to unfollow him recently because like the content was pretty repetitive. And I think his content is really aimed for like people coming out of the workforce and like coming into LinkedIn. So at some point, I think I just outgrew his content, which is fine. Yeah, it happens. But I was just fascinated by how big of an audience he was able to be. I think it was like 300,000-400,000 followers at the time, just on that one channel.
That's huge for LinkedIn.
Huge. I mean, I may never get there.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't.
Do you know what your audience is now?
I think it's like 40K or something.
That's very respectable.
But I'm growing very slowly now that, I mean, the platform's changed.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be a lot easier, but I've also kind of toned down my own time.
Yeah.
The ROI has to be worth it.
Right.
But I still think it's an important channel. And even if LinkedIn is not your channel, maybe Instagram's your channel, I think being on some channel is still important. So I basically took, from there, I took Justin's course on how to build an audience specifically on LinkedIn. And I still recommend that course because it's a foundational course on the knowledge of like why this is important, how people engage with it, how you can come up with content based on your expertise.
Yeah.
And what people's mindset is when they follow you. So how you can write content to be more compelling to that audience, and also how you can write your profile such that when someone is interested in your content and they click on your name, how your profile can be written in a way that converts them. Because ultimately, that's what you want. If they don't pay you, you're just spending time writing content. Right. So that was kind of my journey. So I committed to writing every single day, or not, I didn't write every single day. I committed to pushing out a piece of content every single day for 90 days. So I had a process on how I was doing that. But I think a lot of people, when they think about like why, like they ask me why social matters, right? Because I can't really attribute like money to it. But I think like only in the last couple of years have I seen people care about the people behind the product in software.
Yes, right.
In like they always did in consumer products, even like going to a restaurant. Right. You go to a farm to table restaurant, that's the whole idea, right? You go to a sweetery and that's the whole idea. Like, you know exactly where this meat's coming from, where this farm is coming from, or where these vegetables are coming from, which farm. And some of these menus have it written. Yeah. Right. And I think there was a time when we would just go buy a brand name, right? Like the latest Louis Vuitton or whatever. And I feel like nowadays people kind of shy away from that. Right. Yeah, it really has shifted. I hadn't really thought about this, but it is so much more now about the people behind the brand, what motivates them, the story of how they got to why they decided to do what they're doing. Like all of that would have been like ridiculous in advertising or marketing, like maybe 10 years ago. Well, I mean, now people care about where the materials are coming from. Yeah, is it ethical? Yeah, right? Like, is it real leather? Is it not? Right? Like, so everything has a story that we care so much about. So that, I think, was being transferred into software. I would say that a lot of people that write all the time on LinkedIn are not like software founders. There's a lot of consultants, coaches, people from software that are starting their own consulting practice. But there are like a handful of us that do that, like just share their learnings, experience, stories, and that's what I do. And part of that course tells you to figure out where you have unique knowledge, right? Why do people have to follow you? And I think a lot of times we underestimate like what we know because it's common sense. Like, why would I write about bootstrapping? Like, I'm not like, I've never built a big company, right? That's the first thought you doubt yourself, right? But then I realized from writing for 90 days every day is people really connect with that content, because what I thought was common sense just by doing it for so many years, it's like brand new information to someone else.
I have a very good friend who is always saying, that's so obvious. I'm like, buddy, it's not. It's obvious to you.
Yeah.
And if you can get that, if you can communicate that, but you have to figure out what that is, I guess.
Yeah. And the other thing that I realized was people don't want to be sold to. And this was one of the reasons why I had to look for other channels, was like they weren't picking up my calls. They weren't responding to emails, text messages. Like I was just trying so many things, right? And people want to discover something on their own. Yeah. So I want them to either look up webinar software, maybe come to our site, maybe they'll type in eWebinar, maybe my LinkedIn will come up. I don't know, right? Like I was willing to take that chance. But being active on LinkedIn was part of my brand that it was part of the journey, I guess, that I wanted people to be on as they were discovering like whether we were the right software for them. It was part of being accessible. And then I realized that I was getting all these like kind of dopamine rushes.
Right? I remember them.
Yeah. And it was like, whoa, people actually care about like, what I'm saying. Yeah. Right. And I was just, I'm very good at like having built 3 companies now with very little resources. I'm just very good at being scrappy. Right. And it's like things like, how do you hire someone when you have no money? Right. Like, what are your favorite questions in an interview? Or like some of the mistakes that I made in giving equity to a dev shop in my last company.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was remarkable as someone standing on the sidelines watching this kind of unfold and seeing, I wasn't experiencing the dopamine hits, but I was seeing them hit you, which was very fun to watch. But one of the biggest pieces of feedback was no one is this honest. No one is this transparent about what they know, about what they've done wrong. I think that kind of authenticity and openness people are hungry for. Yeah. They just want to know how to, first of all, it helps them understand they're not alone, but they want real workable knowledge that they can actually like put into practice maybe from somebody who's done it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times people just want to know, they want to be reassured that they're in the right place.
Yeah, right.
Because nobody really talks about their failures. I talk a lot about everything, right? Like some successes, but I've had a lot of failures. Yeah. Right. And not massive ones, but hiring the wrong person, spending money on the wrong thing. And I talk about all of those things, right? Giving equity away to someone who, someone who didn't buy that equity and how that affected my exit. My greatest hustle story of inviting the Zillow CEO to my house for dinner.
With no other guests.
With no other guests. That is another LinkedIn post. I'll put that into the show notes as well. But these are just some of the reasons why I was doing it. And it really forced me to get my thoughts into a very concise, like in a very concise manner, because there are also limited characters that you can put. Right. It's one of those things where like you can't really write a long letter like I wish I could. Yeah. And then it forces you to think about the things that are actually important. Yeah. Like once you start cutting those things out. And it just, I think writing like gets your brain in a different state.
It definitely does. It definitely does. And it's something that if you do more of it, you get better at it, period. Yeah. Like I don't care if maybe you're not the greatest writer. You're never going to be the greatest writer. But if you write regularly with a purpose to your writing, you will get better, period. And especially if you're getting feedback from people, because you start to see, oh, that resonates. And then you start to realize your expertise, right? Something that was just common sense to you is a revelation to others. And that's you learn that. And then you start to be able to identify other things like that. I've had that own experience in writing content for the website or for the blog even.
And I think the cool thing about writing on LinkedIn is you don't have to be a great writer.
No.
Because it's like a longer Twitter post. Right. And okay, fine. It's bad. It disappears in a day. Yeah. Or you can delete it if you don't like it. Yep. Right. And the thing is, the way I write is I write as if I'm speaking. And I do that a lot anywhere, like everywhere else. But you can't really do that in a blog post. Right? I mean,
it's much harder. But definitely in LinkedIn, I think people want that. They want you to write how you're speaking to them. Like if I go on LinkedIn and I see something that's really well crafted, it turns me off. I just want, I think in any kind of social post environment, people just want the information in a direct, authentic way.
And just being on there so actively, like it allowed me to engage with other founders or other executives that were doing similar things.
Yeah, right.
And people are always willing to help. So they're like, if they see that I'm having a problem or I struggle with a problem, like either they make a comment or they DM me and say, hey, like, have you thought about this? So it allowed me to engage with other people and just get free education.
Yeah.
Because I'm also then reading other people's posts because now I'm spending time on there responding. So I'm naturally spending time on there. I mean, I think at my peak, I was probably spending a couple hours a day on there.
When did you really first see engagement? Like, when did you know that? I mean, like, I know there was like, I mean, I know we don't talk about the hockey stick. It doesn't exist. But when did you know you really had some true engagement?
Yeah. So I think when I started, I didn't have a huge following. I think when I started, I had like 2,000 connections.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was a difference between connections and followers because you can connect, you can follow, but you don't have to connect. But a connection is by nature a follower.
Yes. Oh, okay.
So you can follow but not connect with people. Yeah. If that makes sense, right? Like, and so I felt like I got engagement pretty quickly. Like I wasn't looking for like hundreds of reactions, right? Like what I was surprised by was people were active on there. So in the beginning, like if I go back to like some of the posts that I've made before, like now I'm probably onto like 400 or something like that. But in the beginning, I get like 10 likes, 20 likes, 30 likes, 2 or 3 comments. But I think a lot of people are like discouraged by that.
Right.
But you can't be discouraged by that because it grows over time. Right. Like now I'm just starting to build my audience on like platforms like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, but like I have like 20 followers.
Yeah.
And it's like stupid.
It's so easy to get discouraged when you see these people with hundreds of thousands of followers, but like that building audience, you really have to think it's.
But those people started somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
And I think the toughest thing is like you keep doing it. You don't know if people are seeing it. You don't know if you're providing value. You think you look stupid to someone else because your engagement in theory is really low. But consistency beats motivation any day, right? Motivation comes and goes. You're not going to get inspiration, right? Like, but that's why taking these courses is important, right? Because then you create a system.
The structure.
Yeah, there's some structure. You're like, it's best if you have an accountability buddy.
Right.
I didn't really have one per se, but it was like I very quickly built like a small community of people who were also putting out LinkedIn content. So we would kind of trade ideas on what worked, what didn't, things like that. But there were a bunch of, I guess, hacks that I realized over time that I could talk about, like just kind of tips and tricks on how I actually did it.
So if somebody were starting out and you wanted to help fast track them a little bit with some hacks, what would you say? How would you answer that?
I mean, I definitely say to start, like, just take the course. I recommend Justin Walsh's course, but I'm sure there's other courses that are out there. It's only because that's the course I took. I don't think it's very expensive. I think it's like a couple $100 or something like that, but it's well worth it. It's going to cut down your time to experiment. Like someone else has done it. There is an equation. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Oh my God. This is one of like my biggest adult lessons in life was don't figure something out from scratch when somebody else has done it already.
Yeah. Also, try a bunch of different content styles, right? So the course will have multiple different content styles.
Yeah.
So I forgot what they were. It was like education. It was like opinion piece. Like there were like 4 major pillars.
Yeah.
But so many people have already hacked this. So there are different content styles. Also, the content style dictates how you write the content, how you write the hook, right? The first line. How do you get people to expand on your content so they can read most of it, right? So try different content styles because if you don't, you can't find the one that works for you.
Right.
So in the end, I found a content style that worked for me that nobody else had. And then ironically, other people started copying mine.
Right. But it's never as good, right? It always fails. Like if you try to write in someone else's voice, it's not going to be engaging.
Yeah. And I got to say, like every time I tried to copy someone else's template, because you have to, I get so little engagement because it didn't sound authentic.
Yeah, I mean, sure, at the beginning, you're just learning, right?
Yeah.
But like until you get a really clear point of view, clear voice, people aren't going to care.
I mean, there are certain content styles that will work for people with massive audiences. Like they'll throw in a motivational quote. Everybody likes it.
Yeah, right.
But I've actually done the math on this, right? If you have 500,000 followers and then you see like, oh, there's 2,000 people that like this, I should try that. But do the math on the percentage. So that engagement is still low.
Right.
Right. But it seems like a lot because you don't have that following.
Right.
So when you want to copy someone else's content style to see if it works for you, because it looks like they have a lot of engagement, you need to look at the percentage.
Yeah.
And see if it's actually good or not. Because I guarantee you a lot of times it's not that great. But once I found the style that worked for me, like there was a time when I hit like, I think 8 or 10 viral posts in a row in its heyday, like over a course of like 3 months or something like that. And that really shot up my audience, my follower count. I just milked that.
You were LinkedIn famous.
I focus on what worked. I scaled back on the number of pieces that I was writing because it took a lot of time. Those were longer, more intentional pieces. They were listicles. And I just kept hammering them until that ran out.
Yeah, right? I mean, that was amazing. I mean, the number of followers that grew.
It was insane.
It was insane.
It was like 2,000 to 4,000 followers per post.
Per post, right.
But don't forget, I was also spending 10 hours on it.
Yes, right.
So
like how much time had you spent on LinkedIn period before you started hitting that?
I think it was like a year, more than a year and a half or something like that.
So, yeah.
And that was like completely accidental, right? I was like, I think one day I like didn't have enough time and I'm like, oh, I'll just throw everything in a list and like back up each point with like evidence of my experience. So it was like counterintuitive advice based on my experience. And then it worked so well that other people are starting to copy it. In fact, like there was this guy that like outright just copied. He was like a famous like entrepreneur from France.
Oh, no way.
If I say that, people are going to know who it is.
Yeah, okay.
But hey, you did it, not me.
Yeah, right.
There were like 2 points that were exactly the same that he didn't even change. I'm like, bro, come on.
Right.
And these are people that other people follow.
That's wild.
And I even commented on that. I was like, oh, these read wildly familiar. And he like didn't even respond to that. But I'm like, come on, like you.
Well, he's not going to,
like,
right?
Okay, well, you can take inspiration from someone, copy their style, but please don't plagiarize, especially if you're well known, because people are watching you.
Yeah, and by the way, that's one of my favorite writing hooks in the business world is contrary opinion. Right? You have a different opinion than most because of your experience that you can back up with evidence. That's always a winner.
Hey. I'd like to take a second here to talk about my own company, eWebinar, and our mission to rescue people from what I call webinar hell, to give them back their time and save them literally hundreds of hours every month through webinar automation. If your sales team is tired of doing the same demo over and over for unqualified leads or worse, prospects who don't even show up, an on-demand demo powered by eWebinar can help them get their time back so they can close more deals. If you're doing customer onboarding and training on repeat, eWebinar can help you automate those so you never have to do them live again. Customer success teams are using eWebinar to run hundreds of sessions every single month without a live host. Why don't you give our product a try and see for yourself? Visit ewebinar.com to join our own on-demand demo or to sign up for a free trial. All right, now that I've gotten that on my system, let's get back to the episode.
I think it worked. This strategy worked really well for me because I had a system and I was really, really consistent with it. Right. So I couldn't write every day, even though I had a piece of content almost daily. So when I was writing those like listicles, counterintuitive advice, I think I would spend like maybe like a couple hours writing it out.
Yeah.
Another few hours editing it down.
Yeah.
And then I would pass it to you for that one final like edit.
Which sometimes was getting it to fit in this amount of space you had.
I use every character.
Right. No, I know.
And then I would use emojis to like spruce it up a bit. I still do. So I'm like, I'm squeezing every single character in.
Yeah, no, I know.
But my system was like, I wrote on Mondays. I still do that. Like I don't write as much just on LinkedIn anymore because I'm on multiple different platforms, including my own newsletter. But Monday, all I do is write.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And like writing is a hard thing, right? It's not like, well, these 2 hours I'll write and then I'll get back to it tomorrow. Like it's just like a thing, like your mind has to flow.
That's the other big lesson. That's actually that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned about writing. You need concentrated, uninterrupted time.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are.
Yeah. And I also had, I still maintain this, of course. Like it's not a social calendar, but it's just a massive Google sheet.
Yeah.
Of all of my posts, which day it went out, the URL to it after I post it. And then it's like, I had an intern fill in like the number of impressions, reactions, all that. So I could sort it.
Yeah.
Because in the end, I repurposed some of that content.
Right.
And then on one of those tabs, I had all my ideas logged, like things that I didn't, that I never actually expanded on. And there was a time when I was spending so much time on it, my mind was always on it, that like I could be at a restaurant waiting in line and like jotting down ideas because they just came, right? So on Monday, I would go down this list and be like, okay, what do I feel like writing about? And I haven't looked at that in a long time because I have scaled back, not just like I've scaled back on the number of pieces I write, but scaled up on how much time like I spent on each piece. And then I also, the URL of that post is important because I sometimes use that to comment on someone else's post to get further engagement, right? So I'm just like, why am I doing all this? Just to get eyeballs on my profile. Yeah. Because my profile leads to eWebinar.
Right.
And then some other stuff, right? Yep. My profile builds credibility.
Yep.
So if somebody asks a question like, I have a question about hiring, right?
Yeah.
Then I will go to the relevant post from like last year even. I just searched a Google Sheet and I'll be like, by the way, I wrote about this here. And then that gets a few more. So I like kind of like revive that a little bit.
Right.
I think the most important thing is I write on Mondays even when I don't feel like it.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a system of like structured when you do things, but also like you have a system for logging things. You have to create a repeatable process. And then like
what's too easy to not do it.
Yeah. Then you just have to do it no matter what.
Yeah. And I always wrote from my heart.
Yeah.
Even though I had a list of ideas, like it just has to speak to me. And like, I'm of course thinking about a lot of things all the time, but when an idea comes to me, I just write it. And I could be on a plane and I could just get out my notes app and I'll just write stuff. Yeah. I find that that's like, and then I write it as if I'm talking to the other person. Right. But it's just never forced. Right. Yeah, and I definitely I think I want to emphasize on like how important it is to take your time with it. Because people know, like they know if it's like a genuinely like a piece that you spent time on. Right. And that you actually care about. Right. So that like whatever that. Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of the superpower you have with your writing is speaking directly from your own experience, from your heart. Because I mean, again, that's one of the main things that people resonated with and don't expect. Yeah. They don't expect it. It's so unexpected. And so it really stands out. And one of the ways to get way more engagement is like in the first hour or two. Yeah. When it goes out. Yeah. I used to use Buffer to like push out my posts, but now I push them out manually because I also want to like tag myself in it. Yeah. So when you use another software to push things out, like you can't tag someone, right? So I tag myself at the end. I have a call to action and I tag myself because then it's easier to click that and then go to my profile. That's a trick that I learned. But I reply to everybody, like every single comment, like would either get a reaction or a response. So people know I'm there. And then because when someone looks at a post and it has 100 comments, right, it looks like a highly engaged post. But those 100 comments include my responses. Yeah, right. So if I have 50 comments, I actually have it actually appears like I have 100 comments. Yeah, and it's an invitation to engage because you know you're going to get a response. Yeah, absolutely. And also I reply to every DM so people know I'm there. Sometimes it takes me a while because I forget about them and they get pushed down. But I always do that. And I also engage with other people's content at the same time while I'm on there. Yeah, sure. But I never engage for the eyeballs because I know like all these courses teach you like, you should comment on, 20 different posts that have big audiences every day. It is so hard to find really thoughtful content that you want to write something about. And
so what you end up getting is people making comments that are just like clearly there only to get.
Yeah, and it just sounds like AI.
Yeah, right? You're just like, give me a break.
Yeah, so I engage with other creators meaningfully.
Right.
And, and I don't just like say, oh, Jason Lemkin has something. I'm just going to go, oh, great post, Jason.
Right.
Like just it also looks bad. Right. So, and I also find that when I post a meaningful comment on someone else, on someone else's post, then someone else from those comments engage with my question or my comment, then it becomes like another thing.
Right. Because also if you're engaging in a meaningful way, then you're a peer in a way of that person that they're already following. So they're going to look at you. Right.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I think is uniquely me is I'm just myself. Like, I'm super opinionated.
Really?
And I always stand up for what I believe in.
Yeah.
Like, I openly disagree with people if they write a comment or on another post even that I just don't agree with.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people like want to diffuse,
right?
Especially like in social media, because everything like that kind of lives forever and people are kind of mean. So like I do delete and block people who are like there to get me.
Yes.
And how do I know that? Because not only is it like a gnarly comment,
right,
but I go to their profile and they have like 10 connections.
Right.
So then I feel like, well, you're just out there to like be a hater.
Right.
And I just don't need to deal with that.
Yeah. And respectfully disagreeing with someone is different than being a troll.
Yeah, I remember there was this one post that I wrote. I'd never gotten so much hate before.
Which one was
it? It was something about firing fast.
Yes.
And people were
so
outraged. Like they were so mad.
Yeah.
And then I had to write a follow-up post on how firing fast didn't mean firing people like in the middle of their job.
Right. And without cause or without giving them a chance to do their best.
Yeah, it was crazy. But I was like, okay, well, I have a chance to either remove the post or I could show people who I am.
Yeah.
And I chose the latter. And there were people that were like, wow, like you're really patient with this. Like I would, and actually like a lot of those people were developers. Right. Like there was rage in there that was not related to me.
Yeah, had nothing to do with
nothing to do. And I agreed that there are big corporations that just suck, that don't see people as just a number.
Yeah.
But as a startup, that wasn't true. And I wanted to leverage that as an opportunity to tell people, hey, like, this is not how startups treat their people. Like we have 10 people.
No, you can't.
Like we can't treat them like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of people ask me like how I went viral like 10 times in a row, and they think there's some sort of secret. Like there really is no secret. Everything I just listed is a secret. It's being consistent. It's having a strategy, right? It's showing up even when you don't want to. It's being real, letting people know you're there, like responding to them, being kind, even when you're not, people aren't being kind to you.
Don't take the bait, right?
Yeah, don't take the bait. Use it as, a platform to grow your own brand and solidify your credibility, and just like listen and have fun and engage with people. Like, and even if you don't have like 10 viral posts in a row, which is like super rare, you might hit a good one once in a while. But just keep writing. And also like there is no way that you can write for virality. Like if there were, people would just do it.
Yeah.
Right. And like I remember like Jake, our marketer, he actually sent me something a few days ago and he was like, if you want these people to review our software, this is what they charge.
Yeah.
And I looked at one of the packages and it was like $3,000 a month for 3 months, and which includes 2 viral LinkedIn posts a month. And I'm like, what does he mean by that? Because this discredits him.
Yeah.
Because even though this person was the only person in our ICP, I don't believe you.
Yeah, right.
Also, like LinkedIn, I think categorizes a viral LinkedIn post as like 100,000 views. So you'd have to have like 1,000 plus reactions to get there. And most people don't get there nowadays. So like, I'm like, I want you to dig deeper on that, but I've already lost interest, which is actually kind of unfortunate because he was actually in our SCP.
Right.
But you should not guarantee that in case
No, of course not.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can guarantee that.
Let's talk about now what benefits you've seen from this. Like, you know, it's a hard sell maybe to someone at the beginning to say, you know, this is an indirect source of revenue. Like,
I mean, people ask me all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing this? How much money have you made from it? Right. I mean, first of all, like if we only did things that we can attribute revenue to, we'd be doing nothing. Like actually, we'd just be like trying to buy ads, right? Like there's so many things we do in marketing and branding that like really cannot, like you really can't attribute revenue to. You can't quantify it. But what I do know is that social, and back then I was only on LinkedIn. So social was making up 20% of our demo traffic, which was like self-reported. So that was the first question that we asked when someone's in our demo is like, how did you hear about us? And they would say social, but there was only one channel. It was like taking up all my time. But I think the most important ROI, it just gave me a personal brand. Right? Like where else can you do that? Like I don't feel like for business software, that's important. And like LinkedIn was my channel, but like some like crypto bros or, you know, some other internet entrepreneurs might use Twitter. Right? That's where they build their audience, like especially very early on. But I think for business software, like I don't really see another channel outside of LinkedIn. And now like people are including myself, are starting to expand to like other channels like Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, but that's video. Like I'm talking like just written content. But even just being on LinkedIn, I was invited as a guest on podcasts. I still get that. So these are not people I've reached out to. This is just people coming to me now, like inviting me because now I seem like an expert in this. So they're inviting me to speak on their podcast about something I've either written about, or just about founding companies or about bootstrapping. And because of that viral streak, I also was able to turn a couple of those into articles on Business Insider. So what people don't know is companies like Business Insider have scouts on the platforms to look for content like this that is interesting. So I don't even know where to start if I wanted to get an article on Business Insider. I probably have to pay a PR company like $5,000 a month to get there. And I was quoted on multiple different articles, like digitally on like media platforms like Forbes. Right? It's crazy. And then once in a while, I still get some journalists reach out to me because there's also a lot of contributors on, you know, Business Insider or Forbes or like whatever it might be that are writing something featuring, you know, certain founders or certain types of founders or exits or whatnot that I get to be a part of because I put myself out there.
You created an audience and that attracted this, you know, which they would have, like you said, where would you even start?
Exactly. If you had no money. Yeah, and I also, you know, learned a lot of business strategies for free. I know I've touched on that, but it's so important when you work remote and work alone. Like I work with David, he's my life partner, but he's a CTO, he's not customer facing. When you work alone, like you don't learn by osmosis from your coworkers. So this kind of is my office, it is my community. And I learn a lot of business strategies for free. And because I've built unique friendships with people that I've met on the platform, we just exchange notes on like what each other are doing. Like not necessarily on like how to write on LinkedIn. But you know, what are you doing for your company? Like, what am I, you know, this is how I feel. Like, how did you get over that when you were feeling that? Like just general kind of founder stuff.
And is this happening in the comments mostly or in DMs?
Like DMs, like now it's like WhatsApp or text messages. Like once you kind of build that rapport with someone, then you exchange phone numbers. It's just easier, right? Like that's just where you live. But
yeah, how do you quantify that? This valuable resource of like free business knowledge from people who are experiencing the same problems as you.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't believe in myself joining mastermind groups because I'm a nomad. And I can never make those calls. Otherwise, I would. But outside of that, like I think you just kind of have to get to know people through these digital platforms as the world becomes more remote. And there's also like a huge benefit, I guess, like you feel happy when you can support others in their journey.
Yeah.
And part of people putting out content is because of that, right? Like you want to, like, it sounds so egotistical, right? It's just like, oh, I put out this stuff so I can help someone. But you feel pretty good about that. When people are like, hey, I read this or I listened to your podcast and like now I'm doing this thing differently now.
Yeah. I mean, I personally think this is like one of the keys to happiness is that you're actually, your focus is on helping other people. Like, yes, you are putting yourself out there, but you're putting out content that you know from your own experience would actually help people.
Yeah.
It's extremely rewarding in what could be a really lonely endeavor, you know?
Yeah. And then having these conversations have forced me to think about my business in different ways, like that I wouldn't otherwise have. It's led me to multiple courses that I took.
Yeah.
That I also made you take.
Yes.
The ones I don't want to take, I make you take. I've actually made friends, like digital friends that I'm never going to see, like meet in person, that I feel like are genuinely rooting for my success.
Yeah.
And that's hard, like as a founder, right? Yeah. Like there's a lot of people in your social circle that like, they're just not doing what you do.
Yeah. So they never understand.
Yeah, they don't really understand, or like maybe you're in a competitive city, like maybe it's San Francisco or LA or New York or London, where like you kind of question if people are happy for you.
Right.
Right. And so like having people that genuinely want you to win is like such an awesome feeling.
Yeah, for sure.
And these are all friends that I've met through there. And I know I've talked about also building a community of my own, but one of the biggest benefits of being on LinkedIn is like just really being able to build my own community of founders.
Right.
Like at my fingertips that I can text, we're on a WhatsApp group that I respect, that I can just go to for any problem. And then they can go to each other. So that's just another way of like being able to help someone else.
Well, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up. We talked about why you started in the first place, right? How you did it. You gave some very good hacks, I think, to get started. And then talked about the benefits, including those that are more qualitative and intangible, that's nevertheless add, are real, genuine benefits. So from this episode, what is your hot take? I
think my hot take here, just from going on this journey myself, is if you're a startup founder and you are not putting yourself out there on social, if you're not building a personal brand, you are losing to someone that is doing that, right? Say like if somebody's choosing between eWebinar and something else, and that founder is out there and they seem more legit and that person seems more accessible and smarter, and I'm just there with a few hundred connections and not an active profile, like unfortunately, that's my first impression. Yeah. Right. So my hot take is like, don't put yourself in a position where you're losing to someone because it is not just about like writing a piece of content on LinkedIn. It's all the benefits that you cannot quantify. That isn't like revenue into your business, but it's growth. As a person and as an entrepreneur. Yeah, right. What's your hot take? Well, having done none of this myself. Being on the sidelines. Being on the sidelines, my hot take is Melissa Kwan is tenacious AF. I like that. I mean, it's like... That's my favorite hot take of yours so far. Wonder why. It's not me. But like, something I think you have to do when you're bootstrapping is just figure it out, create systems, be consistent. Like think about how much of our success that we have had comes down to those simple approaches. Like you have to be consistent. You have to have a system. You have to find ways to streamline. So anyway, you have to be tenacious AF.
If you've been enjoying this podcast, I've got a small favor to ask. The only way Profit-Led grows is by word of mouth. So if you'll do us a favor and hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening or watching this podcast right now, it'd mean the world to us and help us continue to spend time making these episodes for you. Ping me on LinkedIn if there are particular topics you want us to get into this season. Send me any feedback you have on this podcast because I love hearing from you. My name is Melissa Kwan, last name spelled Kwan. To get notified of new episodes, join our mailing list by going to profitled.fm. I promise to only share things you'll actually care about. Thanks for listening. Bye now.